It was just 5 years ago that doing Salesforce development was much more painful than it is now. You needed to install Eclipse, it was hard to use, and the tooling sucked. Well, things are a lot better now since we have VS Code and Salesforce Extension Pack to help out. To spread the word about this fantastic development and to chime in with my comments and observations about the product, here is my review of Salesforce Extension Pack for VS Code. Let me start with Sfdx Cli, which is the key component that connects scripting with many crucial metadata and DML functions of Salesforce. Introduced in 2017, Sfdx Cli plus VS Code integration provides a key touchpoint between the open source DevOps world and the Salesforce platform. Sfdx Cli is so important to DevOps because it gives engineers a scriptable interface into a Salesforce org, which enables the orchestration of DevOps pipelines. Now, by marrying Sfdx Cli with the most popular interactive developer environment, Salesforce Extension Pack really delivers a powerful and extensible working environment for Salesforce developers. So I'll be getting to a quick demo of how I use the extension pack in just a little bit. But before that, let's go over some of my observations about the product. First, front-end development recently got dramatically better. I did not formally test the front-end stuff in this review, but I have set up a local development server for LWC development. So this works by installing an Sfdx Cli plugin and then running the server in another terminal window. That starts up a local HTTP port while using the local VS Code workspace for source code. So I love this because it changes the time between saving a file and seeing a result on the screen from minutes to seconds. So this is huge. Now, when a developer saves a JavaScript, HTML, or CSS file in their project, the screen is quickly updated. Now on to my complaints. So I've had my share of Sfdx Cli installation problems, and I noted the low rating in the VS Code marketplace because people are having all sorts of installation problems. So I solved this for myself by becoming extremely strict about how I used and installed NPM. I only use Node Version Manager to install Node.js and NPM on Linux implementations only, so that's how I keep it straight. I wonder, why does Salesforce depend on Node.js for such a critical function? The CLI depends on thousands of NPM modules, and who knows when one of those modules will become infected with a cyber attack vector. So my wish is to find a way to preserve the existing Sfdx Cli ecosystem, but to encapsulate the utility into a single binary file. I am not sure this can be done and still preserve the innovative plugins that have already emerged, but distributing a single binary file is the way more modern CLIs operate with languages such as Go. Next complaint is that there are too many version updates. So I constantly see updates. They're coming in all the time. It's at a much more frequent cadence than other software systems that I use. So please do everybody a favor and slow down on the version releases. Next, the Apex language server blocks many would-be Salesforce Extension Pack users because it requires Java to be installed on the local workstation, which is a pain on Windows especially. So, and also since Apex is piggy and it makes extensive use of Java, it eats up memory and CPU processes like crazy. So this makes Salesforce Extension Pack run slowly on all but the newest desktop computers. So I finally got the performance I needed when I got Java off of my workstation and used it on a local server. So this entailed using VS Code Remote in another server in my current segment. So see an earlier how-to article I wrote on how I solved the VS Code performance problem. Finally, I have had my share of support horror stories, and I had one with Salesforce Extension Pack too. For me, the most frustrating thing is handling inbound callbacks at support's convenience. I eventually got the problem fixed after spending unproductive time with support, which I'm sure is something you can relate to. In general, if a new Salesforce developer is not part of a larger user group or big company or other self-help resource, hitting roadblocks and error messages when working with Salesforce Extension Pack can be very frustrating. I wish support was better accessible to the coder trying to work with Salesforce languages. Now, let's take a look at how I evaluated Salesforce Extension Pack for VS Code. Hey everybody, back here in demo mode with Vern. I've got my VS Code ready to go here. The thing to notice that's slightly different from the last time I was showing how to use VS Code is that I've added in the GitHub extension, because that's very useful, especially if you don't know GitHub very well. This helps a lot. So I just rely on that to upload to repositories. I'll show you how to use that later. So other than that, we're ready to go. I'm going to click down here in my VS Code remote access button here. Then I'm going to connect to a host. Then I've got Devops right here. That's the name of the host that I'm connecting to. So it's launching a new window. I'm going to get rid of this window, grow this window, and we see here my terminal is firing up. There we go. It's working. So here I am logged into the root of Ubuntu 20.04 server that I set up for Salesforce development. And what I'm going to do first here is I'm just going to use the simplest possible create project command. So I'm just creating a new project. It's called render-dx. That happens very quickly. I cd into that. And now I'm just going to type out the scratch org creation command. So this will use the default configuration that's in this directory now and create a scratch org for me very easily. But actually, the very first thing I need to do is to log on to my DevHub org. So that's a very, very important first step, is you have to have a DevHub and you have to log on to it first before you do the scratch org. So let's do that. So I'm going to do Sfdx force:device. There we go. Set default dev hub name. Let's get this bigger here. Okay, so this is very helpful when you're doing remote, because it's hard to get the firewalls and everything to work properly to do the easy login, so we have to do it this way. So you first copy this code, then I'm going to control click into that, and that launched Edge down here. I'm using Edge because I barely installed anything on this workstation. And there we go. So now I'll have to log into my DevHub org with the proper authorizations. Good thing I've got my phone handy. Okay, so I'm going to allow that now. And if I put Edge away, you see that I'm logged in. I can now do the force. Well, I'm just going to go ahead now and do the create command. Sfdx force org create project name, excuse me, -f config project scratch def.json -- set default username. So all that tab complete goodness I was doing there is all part of the installation procedure for creating Sfdx Cli workstation that I gave in an earlier video. So be sure to check that. And we're going to wait here for a minute, and I'm going to pause while we wait for the scratch org to be created. Okay, that took about a minute in real time. So we have our org here. And now what I want to do is open it. So the easiest way to do that is, since I set the default username, is just do Sfdx force org open. There we go. So, oh my goodness, look at that. Sfdx Cli is being bad and has generated an error message. Oh dear. Okay, let's take a look at this. Well, fortunately, it's giving me what I want. And then I noticed this error here, waiting to resolve the Lightning Experience custom domain name. So that sounds like maybe an error I can ignore, so I'm just going to ignore it for now. But that is disturbing. Okay, so here I am now in my new scratch org, which, as you know, is an empty org. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to add some classes to this org. So here's how I'm going to do that. If we go back here to Explorer, you notice that I've created this render.dx directory, and I'm in it now. So I want to open that. So open that, and here's my render.dx right there. Okay, I'm opening it. And I look over here in the File Explorer, and this is the new software supply chain stuff in VS Code. And here I'm looking at my wonderful looking directory. So I got classes here, an empty classes directory, and that's how that is how basically you organize your code under Salesforce. So I have this group of classes that I've pre-written that I want to add to this new application I'm developing. So let's say I'm developing a package, and the package needs to have these utility items in here, like various classes that I use. So that's real code. And I have a UUID generator, test classes, and so forth. Before I dismiss this, I did want to point out that because we have Sfdx Cli properly installed with all of the Apex language server and all of the integration points properly installed, it has actually automatically reached out to our new org and pulled down metadata definitions that it can use in the IntelliSense capabilities that the Apex language server gives us. So that's cool. That's happening all by itself. Again, everything's got to be set up properly for this to happen. So now what do I do with this? Let's see. I go back to my terminal. And here's now the cool part. I can upload all of these new classes with force source push. Boom. Let me close this up. And then voila, it worked. So I have added these new classes. I can go back to here. I can actually go to setup. I can look in my code section, custom code, Apex classes, and there it is. Cool. Okay, so that's working. Next, I'm going to alter this org and pull down the metadata changes. So one thing I usually do is in the account object, let's add an email address. There isn't one in there by default. So let's do a new field, and we're just going to pick email down here, and we're just going to do that. And we're just going to type in email, default account email, always document, always create your metadata, always fill it out. Okay. There we go. So I'm just going to default all of this stuff here and all of that stuff there. And I hit double save, but there we go. So email _C. There we go. So now if I put edge away, go back here to VS Code, and I've again had the terminal prompt. So all I do is Sfdx force source poll. And then that will magically pull down the metadata that I have generated by creating that particular custom field. And here, let me shrink this a little so we can see it. So what's going on here is that when you create that one account field, it not only creates a custom field metadata item, but it also touches the layouts and the profiles associated with the account object. So it creates all of these other changes as well. So now I look over here, and I've got my Git repository here, which I have not yet initialized. And if I look here in classes, these are the classes I brought in. If I look over here in objects, now it's created a directory called account and fields with this particular custom metadata in it to define that field. So now what I want to do is save my work up on Git. So I can actually avoid using any terminal commands now to get this done, which is cool, using the extension. So what I'm going to do is hit F1, and I'm going to type GitHub. And I'm going to scroll down here and publish to GitHub. So there we go. So it wants me to log in. All right, I'm going to do that. I'm going to continue here. I'm going to log in with my GitHub username. Super secret password. Okay, I don't need that. Well, that's cool. I think if I just click this, so we're doing an OAuth here. I'm authorizing that to open. And there we go. Now look up here. This is it. I'm going to use a label here like this because it should be unique. And guess what? That did it. It's now published up on GitHub. I can, I'll just prove it to you. I'll go to here to GitHub. I'm logged in as myself. I'm going to go to my repositories, where I'll just type it in. There we go. Oh, I have yet to push it. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to here. Now, what I'm going to do now is, as you can see, it's initialized my repository, and it's basically put everything that I've created as something I need to add to my repository. So I haven't quite, I'm going to list this as a tree. So I haven't quite completed my GitHub steps to see what's going on with my new GitHub repository. So this is my initial commit. And, you know, Salesforce is a fun place, so let's try to put a little fun in here. We'll put the rocket. Okay, so this is our initial commit. And I'm going to check that. Oh, I do need to do a couple things here. I'm going to do a git. Okay, so we're going to set up, we got to set up those parameters for our username. So I'm going to do git config user.name, git config user.email, You notice here that the oh my ZSH prompt has changed to indicate that I'm in a branch that is not yet committed. So that's always helpful. So I've done that. I'm going to try to do my commit here again, and voila, we did that. And now the GitHub extension gives us now this ability to just publish to our GitHub repository. It's uploading the files. And now I can open this on GitHub with the initial commit. And we can look at the code that we generated. So we have down here, we got our classes, we have our objects, fields, and this is the metadata we generated. So there you go. We have taken the Scratch org and modified it, added new classes to it, and done it to GitHub fairly smoothly. And so this is a good thing with Salesforce extensions for the extension pack. It's fantastic, really, just to be able to do this one thing, to get your feet wet and to start understanding all of the different parts of the metadata. So let's go to the next part. Okay, everybody, I'm back, and now I'm going to show you how I use Salesforce Extension Pack and VS Code and Sfdx Cli to patch an existing org to edit an Apex file directly. So let's do that. I'm in the same place I was before. I'm going to log on to my Devops host. I've done that. I'm going to put this away. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to use my terminal here to get my project create. Again, I'm going to use a very, very basic project create command. This time the project name is mypatch. As soon as that is done, I'm going to open the folder, mypatch. There we go. And now, yes. And now what I'm going to do is go back to my terminal. Control Tab. Terminal firing up on Devops. There we go. I was busy doing the metadata refresh. Go back to terminal. Okay, there we got a terminal. So now what I'm going to do is log on. It's always an important step to never forget. Okay, we are going to copy this code right here. We're going to click here. And in case you're wondering, I had to switch to Chrome because Edge failed me. So there we go. I'm now logging into my org, the live org that I want to modify. Okay, I'm going to allow access. I can throw away my Chrome window here. Okay, so we've finally logged in. So now the next thing is I want to pull down one specific class that I want to alter and change and then re-upload it. So the way you do that is this Sfdx source, and now what I'm going to do is retrieve a specific class, and I have so what we want is the metadata is Apex Apex class utility. Utility is the name of the class I'm retrieving. And I'm not going to pause here, but it does take some time for this command to complete. Oh, that's not too bad. So you see here, it should have landed here in our classes directory, our utility class. So I'm just going to alter this in a trivial way. just gonna okay, so I have altered this file. I'm going to save it now. Now the next thing to do is to deploy. So let's do that. So we're just simply going to, let's make this bigger. I'm going to use this command here. Let me go over it. So I've got sfdx force source deploy. I'm zeroing in on the Apex utility class utility, and I'm going to do, since I'm going into a production org, I have to run my unit tests, and I'm going to say test level run local tests. That's a standard kind of test run. So by the way, all of these commands here are very case sensitive, so be careful when you're typing. So I'm going to run that. We're going to pause it and take a look at the output that gets generated, and that takes about 3 or 4 minutes. So stand by. Okay, this has completed, and as you can see, that was my test run results and the test coverage that I have on all of my classes. And right here we can see we have a confirmation that the utility class that I deployed has been run and run against tests. So that's good. So I find this extremely useful on a day-to-day basis. It kind of makes you feel like a grown-up to be able to modify the org directly if you have to. So this ability is not really part of DevOps pipeline, but it's definitely a key capability that learning how to use Sfdx Cli, how to use VS Code, and integrating it with the Salesforce Extension Pack can make you more productive as an admin. So on to the next demo. Hey everybody, I'm back to show you how I tested the debugger in VS Code using Salesforce Extension Pack. And let's switch over here and take a look at our screen, and you can see that I've actually switched servers. I'm no longer on that Devops sandbox server that I've created, but I switched over to my production server, and you can see I've got 16 cores going on here. Another thing, for the debugger to work and for the Apex language server to work properly, you always have to make sure that this is set to the correct location. And here is the location. It's in userlib JVM, Java 8, OpenJDK, etc. So that's for Java 8, the OpenJDK that I installed, but it could be different depending on which Java you've got on your production server. So make sure this is the directory that points to the directory that has the bin directory in it. So you're not pointing at the Java binary here, which you can actually get away with, but point to the Java directory, which is buried somewhere, usually in your settings or in your Linux directory tree. So let's go on here and take a look at what I've got going on. I downloaded my main app here, so you can see I've got a giant set of classes. And what I'm trying to debug is this. So here I've got a test opportunity, and I've got a custom kind of quote button here. So when I click on that, oopsie daisy, I have an error. Oh my, the dreaded null dereference a null object, meaning I've got a pointer object that's null somewhere. So let's see here. I've got T opportunity to quote line 396. So I'm going to remember that. And I'm also going to go back here. I'm going to put away the settings here, and I'm going to minimize my terminal. And then what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to set myself up to use the debugger. And the way you do that is you run an sfdx command, hitting F1, and then I turn on my Apex debug log for replay debugger. That's a mouthful. So this is working because I've logged on to my sandbox org. I'm doing this in a sandbox. And I see here that it's worked. So what this has done, it has set fine debugging rules to the Salesforce cloud so that I can temporarily track every single thing that Apex does. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to regenerate my error. Okay, so that's cool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the debug logs. And now, as you can see, I have recently generated a debug log that I can load here. And I can actually examine this debug log, and I can see, I'm going to hit Alt-Z here to wrap everything, that I've got this is my error here. So now what I can do, this is the fun part, I can launch Apex Replay Debugger with the current file. Okay. So this is what I'm looking at up here on the top of the window. And you see it just changed. And it also revealed the debugger sidebar here. So what I can do is I want to step into, let me get rid of this. And you can see it's opened up the very first, I'll move this over here. And you can see that it's opened up the very first class, which is the entry point for that button. So I'm also going to just keep stepping into, because that's the way that you want, if you want to follow along. Oh boy, look at this. Okay, so I've hit my big class here, and I don't want to go stepping through this. So I'm going to show you how I put in a breakpoint. So what I'm going to do now is go to line 382, which is where the error is happening, somewhere in here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this line, and I'm also going to use the command here to toggle a checkpoint. So now let's check out what happened over here. So over here in the debugging sidebar, you see that we have a breakpoint has been set up, and then we also now have a checkpoint, which we can actually upload to Salesforce, and I'm going to do that right now. So this is uploading, a checkpoint, meaning a place where I can go to and stop the debugger. So I've done that. I'm going to need to regenerate my error quote here. Okay, got an error. Okay, now here's the really cool part. So we're going to load the new debugger, Debug Logs, get the latest one. I'm going to run, launch this thing, launch Apex Replay. Oh, okay, there we go. We're running. I moved it over here. So now we got to, I'm just going to hit this thing here, which is continue now. And you see it stopped right here. Get rid of this. It stopped just before this giant assignment statement I have here with a new custom object, or with the object, with a quote object. So if I look over here now, what's going on is I'll collapse this so we get it clear, and we look at these local variables, and I've got a local variable called this opportunity, or this, which is the class variable in this particular class, and I've set all these variables in here. And if I look in here, I got my account, I got my billing address, billing contact, null. That looks bad. Billing contact, null. Okay. So as you can see, I'm able to inspect the runtime values of various structures here, and I'm able to discover that this is null. And therefore, before I do any kind of giant new new object creation here, I better check these values. So that is now a problem, an issue that will be fixed somehow. So that's how I use the debugger. I have given Salesforce Extension Pack a Keen and Vision scorecard rating of 3.7. I gave low marks for ease of use due to installation issues and support because, well, you know. And I gave Salesforce Extension Pack a 5 on whether I would recommend the product to a friend. So on to my conclusions. Salesforce Extension Pack delivers on the promise to augment VS Code, which makes it a powerful and productive platform for day-to-day Salesforce developer activities. With Salesforce Extension Pack installed, using VS Code and Salesforce Sfdx Cli improves a developer's productivity, especially when compared to using the Eclipse or Developer Console. There is still plenty to improve upon, such as the awkward installation procedure and other glitches that can turn into showstoppers. I wish that Apex language server were more lightweight and the Java was not needed as well. And also, please slow down on the versions. So despite any ratings or other reservations, I wholeheartedly recommend that all new and existing Salesforce developers immediately adopt the best free Salesforce development system available. Hopefully, by seeing how using these tools improves the daily workflow of a Salesforce developer, you and your team will be inspired to make the leap today. So thank you very much for watching this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe.